Hello guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my videos. It's here for you guys the best Bloodline mode tier list in Shindo Life. Now in this video, it's going to be over the Bloodline modes, not the Bloodlines themselves. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the tier list here. And if you have any thoughts, just feel free to comment them. I do read every comment and I try to reply to them, but it's kind of getting a little bit big recently. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button to click on more. Let's get right to the video, guys. Alright guys, so before I start this tier list, just keep in mind this is a Bloodline mode tier list, not a normal Bloodline tier list. So starting off with the Kuma, it's obviously going to go into really good. The Susanoo is really good for defense, and it can actually be good for M1 combos if you actually place lock stun them. Not only that, but it does have a really good C spec. Goto Joke is actually going into meh. I feel like Goto Joke's mode is actually by far the worst part of the mode. Now Joke is pretty much the exact same thing but less damage, so they're both going to be going to meh. Goto Joke and Joke mode is actually really bad in my opinion, and in a lot of opinions, the Goto Joke mode is actually the worst part of the Bloodline. Ashes Storm's actually going into the bottom of really good. The M1s actually do stun, but they knock back, so it's kind of just like a cancel out type of thing where you M1 them, they get stunned, so you might be able to combo into that, but other than just place locking stun them, there's not gonna be much you could do with Ashes Storm M1s. Azarashi's gonna be going into good. The Z2 spec, which is the one that pulls people in, it's basically just a better thread blade, and it is really good for M1 combos. Azim Sekko mode is actually going to the bottom of good. I actually feel like Azim Sekko mode is not that good overall. The stats aren't that high for the mode, and the C spec, if they block, it makes it completely useless. Bankai Kuma is obviously going to go into broken. Bankai Kuma's mode is actually one of the best parts of the Bloodline. It is a mode drain and also has another cheese seal on the weapon spec. I know a lot of you guys don't know about weapon specs, but it does actually have a weapon spec combined with the fact it does have the Susanoo, which is really good for defense. Now Black Shock's going to be at the top of meh. Black Shock's Z spec is actually really good, but I feel like the stats don't do it justice. So when it comes to Black Shock, you're better off just using any other Z spec in the game pretty much, because Black Shock just doesn't hold its own. Boramaki's going to be going into really good in the middle of really good. Now the reason for this is because Boramaki's mode is actually quite good against people that are noobs in the game, because it resets their cooldowns overall. But when it comes to Boramaki, the weapon spec's a counter, and most of the time you're going to want to be using a fighting style weapon spec if you're going to use Boramaki, because the whole point of using Boramaki is you just want to do the big combos. So Boramaki mode is not that good, but it is good enough to be in the middle of really good. Bubble mode's going to go into the bottom really good. It's pretty much just good for zoning people. It's really easy to get out of the C spec, but the M1s can clutch it up sometimes. Clay is actually going to the bottom of really good. Now Clay's mode is actually a lot better than it used to be, to the fact where I'm actually going to putting it below Ashes Storm above Bubble. Clay's mode is one of the best parts of Clay. You basically have infinite flight and you can actually do quite a bit of damage. Cobra's mode is going to the middle of good. Cobra's mode is actually, funnily enough, the best part of Cobra, but even with the mode being somewhat good, it does drain your mode like crazy if you decide to attack with it, but you do get a second life. Dangan is actually going into the bottom of good. I feel like Dangan mode is actually very weak, but the buffed M1s can carry you sometimes. Diva Red is actually going into, I'm actually going to putting it probably in good. I'll put it to the top of good. The stat increase it gives you and the M1 bonus it gives you is actually really good. The C spec is kind of wonky now after the AoE fix, so yeah, I would mostly use this for the weapon spec, which is literally just a Rengoku pool. Dioseko mode is actually one of the weakest parts of Dioseko, so I'm actually going to be putting it probably below Clay and above Bubble. Dioseko mode is actually good for catching people if you manage to hit the C spec. The C spec is actually quite hard to hit on people that are actually moving. I don't know if you guys have ever used Dioseko mode. I'm sure the people that have can actually agree with me on this, but the stat increase it gives you and the speed bonus it gives you are obviously really good, and I'm preemptively putting it to the bottom really good, just in case they add a second mode. Forge Rengoku, obviously the top are broken. You know, those dirty domain spammers, they spam domain on themselves, they can avoid anything. Not too much that the Z spec actually does a lot of damage. Ghost Karashi is actually going to the bottom of broken. Ghost Karashi mode is actually one of the best parts of Ghost Karashi, because a lot like Bankai, it does actually have a mode steal, but the M1s do not actually knock people back. So when it comes to Ghost Karashi, there is actually, sometimes it's better than Bankai, sometimes it's not. It just depends on what you're doing, but it is insane for M1 combos. Giovanni Shizen is actually going to really good below Boramaki, above Ashes Storm. The second mode of Giovanni Shizen is actually really good for damage if you can place locks on them. Hair's mode is actually going into meh, probably at the bottom of meh. After the nerf, hair mode is actually a lot worse than it used to be. After the nerfs, hair mode, the C spec lasts like half the duration it used to, so it pretty much is quite useless for things nowadays. Wanziyame is actually going to good. I'm gonna put it to the bottom of good. The Z spec can be good for just messing with people, because it does have a cheese steal when you M1 people while in the mode. Ink mode is actually going into good. I'm actually good putting it below Azim Sekko above Dangan. The mode of Ink is actually quite good for escaping and initiating fights, but when it comes to actually continuing the fight, the M1 can actually get really annoying where it's ranged, so you can't actually close M1 people. Iron Sands mode is actually going to really good above I'm actually gonna be moving Ashes Storm right here. I'm putting Iron Sand right here. So when it comes to Iron Sand, the M1s are actually really insane. They're one of the longest M1s of the game, and the C-Spec is really good for team fights. Eternals mode was actually nerfed recently. I'm gonna be putting it below a Zim Cycle above Ink. Eternals mode was nerfed, so it only hits half the amount of times it used to. Damage was not nerfed, but the duration was the biggest part of Eternal C-Spec, and after the nerf, it's not nearly as good as it used to be. Not to mention the stats are terrible on it. Now, Jeromaki mode is actually one of the best parts of Jeromaki. I'm actually going to be putting it above Giovanni Shizen and below Boromaki. The reason for this is because the C-Spec is actually really good for combos. The tongue, if you could stick them with the tongue, it's pretty much just a free combo extender that does like 50-60k damage. Not to mention the M1s do a lot of damage. You can manage the place locks on them. Kakatsu mode is actually one of the weakest parts of Kakatsu, in my opinion. I'm be putting it below Black Shock. It's a Z-Spec, so most of the time you want to be using a Fate Spirit, Tailed Beast, or Demonic Spirit, you know, so one of those Z-Specs instead of Kakatsu, because overall Kakatsu mode is just not as good as those. Kaijin, even though it is a Z-Spec, it is quite annoying to fight. I'm actually putting it probably below Azarashi and above Cobra. The Z-Spec is a monkey that comes out and attacks people. It actually is really annoying to fight, and it used to be quite good, but it did get a nerf recently. Now, Kamaki mode, I'm actually putting it below, it'll go to the top of really good. I feel like Kamaki mode, it does have an insanely high damage burst, which is why it's so good. If you can manage to land that C-Spec on someone, half their HP will be gone instantly. Karada mode is actually, it's very weird. I'm actually putting it to the top of it. I feel like Karada mode is actually extremely weird. You get wings. I'm sure it has to do with Naruto, but I feel like the C-Spec is actually really easy to avoid unless you're stunned beforehand. And if you have to stun in the C-Spec, it's better just to use a C-Spec that does both at the same time. Kenichi mode is actually going to the bottom of Broken. The passive auto dodge is still on Kenichi mode. Kenichi mode is still the best part of Kenichi, especially after they nerf the abilities. So Kenichi mode is still really good. The passive auto dodge is busted. In fact, I'm actually putting it below Forge Rengoku. Now, Dokai mode is actually the best part of Dokai, besides the first ability. So I'm going to be putting it probably above Azarashi. The Dokai mode C-Spec is actually really good for M1 combos if you can manage to land it. And the M1s are actually really good because they do not knock people back. Kanchu mode is actually probably good. I'm actually putting it into really good at the very bottom. The Chi Steal on the mode is actually probably the best part of the mode. If you can manage to land that C-Spec and a couple M1s, their entire Chi bar is gone. Light Jokai mode is actually going to the... I'm actually putting it in Broken below Kenichi and above Bankai. The reason for this is because Light Jokai mode is actually the best part of Light Jokai. Light Jokai second mode or third mode. No, it's the third mode. The third mode is absolutely insane. The C-Spec can like... It's basically just a free combo starter, and it does a lot of damage, and the weapon spec is actually really good. Not to mention the M1s are boosted. Mecha mode is just bad. I don't really feel like I need to talk about this. Mecha Spirit mode is absolute doo-doo garbage. Minakami mode, I'm actually putting it into meh. I'm actually putting it to the top of meh. I feel like Minakami mode is overshadowed by a lot of the better C-Specs in the game, because when it comes to the Minakami mode, the main reason why you would use it is the M1s, but the M1s actually got nerfed. Minakaze mode, obviously going to be going into Broken. I'm actually putting it probably below Forge Rengoku, above Kenichi. Minakaze mode is actually one of the best parts of Minakaze. I actually underrated the mode until I started using it recently, and its mode is actually insanely good. It's basically a time stop and an auto dodge combined with the fact you actually do get a lot of stats and a free counter. Naramaki mode, I'm actually putting it into really good above Akuma. Now, the reason for this is because of the Tentasaiyan mode. When it comes to Naramaki, the Tentasaiyan mode is actually quite good, but you only get 40 seconds to use it. So, you know, you could take that as you will. I would much rather use just a normal Tailed Spirit. Nectar's actually going into good above Asarashi below Dokai. The reason for this is because Nectar's mode is actually really good now. I don't see anyone using it, but the Z mode is actually an infinite stun if you can continue landing them ones on them. Otisaburu mode is actually one of the best parts of Otisaburu. I'm actually putting it into really good above Ashes Storm, below Dioseko. Now, when it comes to Now, when it comes to Otisaburu, it actually has 2 stuns in its kit with the normal Saburu C-Spec on the weapon spec, and the C-Spec, which is, it has the same C-Spec as Akuma pretty much, where it can like infinitely make damage come out, and you can one-shot a group of people instantly. Not to mention, it does have buffed M1s. Okami mode, going to the top of bad, it glitches out sometimes. It literally just doesn't work. Paper mode, I'm actually putting it into good, probably above Nectar, below Dokai. It is another Z spec. It does trigger almost instantly now, and it does do a lot of damage. You can fly with it as well. Pikaseka mode is actually quite good. I'm actually putting Pikaseka mode below Dioseko. No, it's definitely going to be below Giovanni Shizen, above Iron Sand. Pikaseka mode is actually quite good for initiating fights and things like that, because it pretty much is an initiator, combined with the fact that the weapon spec is an auto dodge. Vine mode, dude, I'm gonna putting it to the bottom of broken just because of how trolly it is. You could practically just avoid being seen, and now that the AoEs have been nerfed in the game, it actually is very, very hard to fight a Vine mode user now. Ryan Akuma mode, I'm actually going to be putting it below Akuma. I feel like the normal Akuma mode is better because it has all the same things of Ryan Akuma mode with a better C-spec. Ryan Ren mode, man, I'm actually going to put it to the top of meh. The Z-spec was nerfed so immensely. It doesn't have nearly the size of the AoE it used to, and there's not really any reason to use Ryan Ren mode. Ren Goku mode, I'm actually putting it into really good, probably actually at the bottom of really good. The mode can carry you sometimes, but I feel like the mode, you know, you have to switch between modes. It's a lot of thought process to do an actual fight. If you could do it properly, you could probably be a god with Ren Goku, but for most people, it's just not going to be a very good choice. Red Shiki mode is actually quite good, as I've said before. It's going to be going below Oda Sabaru, above Astra Storm. The C-spec is actually really good for chasing people down, block breaking people, and the weapon spec is actually good for stunning and combo extending. Now, Riser Kuma mode is actually just going to be going below Bankai. It has all the same things as Bankai, but it doesn't have a weapon spec, which makes it inferior to Bankai. Raikou Shizen actually is going to be going into really good above Akuma, below Naramaki. Obviously, the C2 spec can nearly one-shot someone. That's the main reason why. Ryuji Kenichi mode is actually going into broken, above Mitakaze, below Forge Goku. Ryuji Kenichi mode gives you 2 lives, insane stat bonus, and you get a Z-spec that nearly one-shots someone. Overall, it's just a really busted mode, but Forge Goku mode is just better. Sabaru mode is actually going into probably above Minakami on meh. Overall, Sabaru mode is just not very good in a lot of different cases. Sand mode is just a free auto dodge. I'm actually putting it to the bottom of good. It's literally just a free auto dodge, but it doesn't work half the time. Sriracha mode is actually one of the best parts of Sriracha. I'm actually putting it to the top of the Akumas. No, it's going to be definitely going to go below Minakaze. It basically drains stamina for people and it chi seals people. Combined with the fact it does have a block breaker and it does do massive amounts of damage. Also, the throwables are really, really cool. Satori's will be going probably to the bottom of really good. Not the bottom of really good. The bottom of really good in the Akuma section. Now, when it comes to the Satori Akuma, the C-spec is mainly meant for just running away from people. The weapon spec was also nerfed in damage. Seishin mode is actually good, better than it used to be, but I do not feel it's still very good. So I'm putting it to the bottom of good, just because I feel like Seishin mode, it can be improved a bit. I can get the reason why they don't want to buff the C-spec too much, because it can be really, really useful in combos if it's buffed. But as of now, Seishin mode, you don't really use Seishin for the mode ever. Sekko mode is actually one of the weakest parts of Sekko, but I'm still going to be putting it to the bottom really good. The Z-spec can be really, really good in a lot of different cases, and it does give a decent stat bonus. Shadow mode, who even uses this thing? I'm actually going to be moving hair up above Sabaru and below Ryan Ren. Shindai Ren mode is actually going to broken. I'm actually putting it below Ryuji Kenichi, above Minakaze. I feel like Shindai Ren mode is absolutely busted, garbage, OP, dummy OP, you know what I mean? But I do not feel like it's better than the other modes, because the other modes just give you that slight edge. Like Rage Kenichi is a Z spec, so you can use a C spec with it. And Forge Ren is also a Z spec where you could domain yourself and avoid anything. Shindai Ren mode is still really, really busted. Now Shindai Akuma mode is actually not nearly as good as it used to be, but it still is probably the best Akuma mode besides the ones in Broken, just because the clones can be quite annoying at times. Shiver Akuma, though, is actually going to the top of really good. Above all the other Akuma. Shiver Akuma mode, the C-spec can actually make you win fights alone just off the C-spec, and the weapon spec is actually really, really annoying to fight. Shizen mode basically does like half the damage of Raikou Shizen. I'm actually putting it probably above Astra Storm or below Red Shiki. When it comes to Shizen, it's as I said before, it's just basically Raikou Shizen, but a lot less damage. Storm mode is actually pretty good, so I'm actually putting it above Eternal and below Zipseko. Storm mode is actually really, really good for team fights because it does have a pretty big AoE and stuns people over and over again. Goku mode is actually quite good for block breaking and doing a bit of damage. I'm actually putting it probably below Pikaseko on really good. Tengoku mode is actually one of the weaker parts of Tengoku, but the Tengoku mode is actually still quite good in a lot of different cases. Xenodoke mode, actually putting it, you know, honestly, if this was a PvE tier list only, Xenodoke mode obviously would be the only one in Broken. But Xenodoke, the mode, I'm actually putting it into Broken still. I'm going to be putting it probably below Light Joking, above Bankai. Now, the reason for this is because I feel like Xenodoke mode is still quite good for PvP, but it's just so good for PvE, it has to be in Broken. Glacier, I feel like it's actually pretty terrible. I'm actually putting it below Shadow, above Akami. Totally didn't forget to add Sengoku to the list. So Sengoku is actually going into really good. It's actually a lot like the other Kumas, but worse in my opinion. So it does have the full Susanoo with the blocking increase and all that good stuff. But I feel like all the C-spec and weapon spec of Sengoku is actually much worse than all the other Akumas. Anyways, guys, that's actually it for this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, click on more. See you next one, guys. Bye bye.